You have an idea. You want to tell it to the world, but you don't know where to start. That's where Anchor comes in. They have the tools for you to edit, produce, and record your idea right from your phone or computer. It's the easiest way to reach and grow your audience. They publish for you to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and all major platforms. And to top it all off, they match you with advertisers so you can earn from your passion and your wonderful idea. So tell me, what are you waiting for? Download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started and follow your dream. Welcome to Disruptive Adventism. My name is Jose Briones, and I'll be your host for this podcast. This podcast is about discussing the polemical statements and practices that are part of the Adventist fabric, which in turn shape this belief system to be unique and relevant for today's society. Our topic for today finalizes our series on culture with the topic of music, worship, and the interaction with culture. We hope you enjoy it, and with nothing else to say, let us begin. Thanks for listening again, everyone, to another episode of Disruptive Adventism. Today we're going to be talking about music, and we have our social media coordinator here from Disruptive Adventism with us. His name is Felipe Mendes. So here he is. How's it going, Felipe?
Hi, what's up?
It's going well, So give us a little bit of your background before, people now know that you're the guy behind his social media posts, all of those great images and different fonts. You're the guy. But tell us a little bit more about yourself, where you're from, what you've been doing, and where you're heading.
Thank you, Jose. And, part of that is a little bit what we're going to talk about today, which is, creativity, whether it's graphic design, but now we're going to talk about music. And I'm just thankful that Jesus can use me in this way. But thank you for that. My context, I didn't grow up Adventist. I came here to the States at a very young age, and my parents were not Adventists yet. They were baptized when I was 5, so I grew up in church. But I did go through a little bit of a transition, from that non-Adventist culture, that super Christian culture into one that is drastically different. I remember to this day complaining about not being able to watch my cartoons anymore on Sabbath morning. But that's a little bit of my context. So I grew up not necessarily immersed like everybody else did, like third generation Adventists, and I went to public schools my whole life. In fact, the first private school I went to was actually Southern, which was a great experience. I recommend it. If anybody can go to private school, they should. But when I went to Southern, that's really when I really started formulating who I was as a person, and it's a great context to be around, great spirituality on that campus. And it's also where I developed my musical skill a lot more than I did in the years previous to that. So I started playing the guitar and singing at around age 14, but it was around age 20 where it really developed and really got immersed into Christian music.
So you're talking about a little bit more about your music experience. So tell us a bit more, kind of exploring that side. What's your relationship with music? How are you related to music? And maybe it goes deeper or to areas in the past, but go ahead, tell us a little bit about what is your relationship with music and how do you see that affecting yourself, just your personality?
Up until age 14, music was not that big of a part of my life. However, I did, participate in church choir and stuff like that. But at age 14, I really started picking up my aunt's nylon guitar. It was an Octavio, so it was a nice sounding guitar, but I had no idea how to play it. And she began to teach me, and then that's when I really started to fall in love with music. When I was able to feel myself playing the song, that's a whole different experience. And from then on, music just became something that I breathed through lyrics, through artists' backstories, some of their album art, really anything, just kind of really influencing how I see life and how my perspective is, going about day to day. So at that point, that's when music started being something passive and something very active in my life. And to this day, it's something I breathe.
I think I can resonate with that a little bit in the sense of most of us just listen to music, and it's kind of like in the background. something that we use for the background.
It's just noise, yeah.
Right, to a certain degree. But what I hear you say is that you have a more active component, composing, like, maybe getting involved with music. So how is music relevant to you, and more of like a maybe spiritual sense, or kind of like how is it related to culture? How is music related to culture? Why is it so important? Why is it an important part of culture, in your opinion?
Well, to start with how it's relevant to me, I could journal my spiritual journey by just giving you a playlist of songs.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So that's just how engraved it was part of my like first spiritual, like, I guess, growth spurt in a sense, So it's just, if I could give you this list of songs, you can see where it was at which point of my life just by looking at the album year which was released and the kind of tonage and the message that it brings. So that's just how it's relevant to me. It's how I'm able to connect with God, communicate, but also landmark my journey. Kind of pinpoint places that I've been to. And I'm sure that that's going to be how it's going to be in the future. But to go on further into culture, music is not just how I see my spiritual life, but it's just how I see life in general. Now, this goes a little bit back into my, not so immersed Adventist context. I was exposed to a lot of other music other than just Christian music. Being Brazilian and my parents being from the Tennessee equivalent of Brazil, there's a lot of, country music, a lot of music back from their homeland. And so those influenced me in how I saw culture too. My parents were always welcoming at home of non-Adventists, and they would bring their music. Sometimes they would even bring their alcohol. We wouldn't partake or anything, but it was part of that culture, and the music was really the big thing that surrounded those kinds of gatherings, with the barbecue and all that stuff. And so I think music in itself is a lens that we can see other people. You know what I'm saying? Not just ourselves, but it opens a window kind of to see other cultures when you listen to songs of different places. I've seen very classy Brazilian music, bossa nova, and I've seen very like country Brazilian music. So it's like, it just opens your mind to different lives, different people's way of living.
Right. Yeah, I think I can resonate with that, especially since, I'm also from a different country. I came here to the States about 8 years ago, and, it's different. Music in the States, you have, I guess, different types. I mean, depending on where you are, you have the South, very country. You have up north, it's just different vibes.
Florida, Georgia line,
as
opposed to like Jay-Z.
Yeah, you're crossing different spectrums, and even within the same community, like, you have different communities that are different to listen to different things. Like, some people like rap, some people like rock, some people like jazz, some people like, more classical music or things like that. It just depends on where you are, or like, the things that
different flavors, like everywhere.
Yeah, and I think that what you're saying is true, that music definitely affects culture, and music.
And it tells their story too. It doesn't just directly affect them, but it tells you their past.
Right. So it communicates a story.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does that to us. Now, when it comes to music as a disruptor, right? Like, when you are, at least when I am, listening to something, maybe peaceful or whatever, and then all of a sudden, like, some beat, like the new hottest song comes in the radio, and it's like, whoa, like, my mood changes. Like, it's like, man, that's a good thing. That's how I interact. We all interact with music. So how have you seen people, not maybe just yourself, but how have you seen people interact with music? Positive, negative, very different ways, or just blended. How is it that you see people interacting with music as a whole?
Well, there's a myriad of different reactions that we see, right? Some people are okay with like having heard a very, calming song, and then the next pop song, like you said, comes up, and they have no problem just going right into the next song and enjoying that. I've seen some people more reluctant, to different kinds of music. And when it comes down to it, you can't just pinpoint it down to, okay, everybody will either react one way or another way. We have to remember that as complex as every walk of life is, a reaction to a song can be. Some person could be torn between understanding the message of the song and being captivated by it, but because they're not used to the style, or they're more reluctant to listen to the style, the message isn't hitting home. So there's so many different reactions really you can have when you're listening to music. All depends on where you come from.
Now, when it comes to the conversation that we have within Adventism, right, about music, there's kind of like a lot of camps.
Yes.
There's different people that really, they prefer a certain version of music. They prefer classical music, or they prefer more contemporary music, right?
Yes.
Well, let's start by where do you fall on that spectrum? Where are you more, comfortable in? Like, what's your natural element per se?
I can begin to say that my natural element today is not what it was 10 years ago. I would fall more in a camp back then of, I would rather not have percussion in music. I'd rather listen to only Christian music and, something like that. But ever since Southern, really, I just kind of like my mentality has evolved. And today I'm really comfortable with any kind of song that relays a authentic and raw message, unless it's, derogatory, unless it's like demeaning, right? And it's overly negative in the sense where it's not doing your mind any good, which we could get into in a little bit about how that affects you, right? But besides that, I'm pretty much comfortable with listening to anything. I listen mostly to Christian music, but anything else really I'll listen to too.
Now, you're saying that there are, well, you're kind of categorizing, right? Like, you have Christian music and you have non-Christian music per se.
Which is a bad habit. And we'll get into that because, like...
How so? How so is it?
Well, especially in the Adventist culture, I've seen, the overall Christian community be a little more lenient, but, in our Adventist culture, we really compartmentalize. We really separate between, holy and secular. And the second degree of mistake we have there is assuming that secular inherently means negative or it means bad.
Okay.
But really, in the sense of its definition, it's just the antithesis of holy, which means separated for a purpose, right? Okay. It doesn't necessarily need to have a negative connotation to it. Why? Just because, let's say, a song doesn't explicitly talk about God or Christianity or spirituality doesn't necessarily mean it's bad, right? Because you'll have songs like, let's say, an artist like NF, very rising star right now in rap. He's not explicitly like Christian or anything like that, but he's also open about sharing about his faith and his journey. And one of his songs called Let You Down, he's just talking about the pressures that he faced as a child, trying to live up to his parents' expectations and feeling the guilt and the anxiety and the depression for having let his parents down. And that doesn't necessarily talk about God, right? It doesn't necessarily talk about Jesus or lift his name on high, but it expresses a very real reality, a very real emotion that I think can be a helpful tool for people to find words to emotions that they didn't have words for before. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So I think that just because a song is secular doesn't mean it can't be constructive.
Okay.
That's not to say that there aren't destructive music.
Right. So if I understand correctly, what you're saying is that you have this secular song per se, I'm not talking about Jesus, not overly expressing God or, things like this.
Correct.
And this can still be helpful for you to understand life, for you to understand what the Bible's saying, yes, or things like that. Now, when it comes to that, is it and this is a big debate, is it the lyrics or is it the style? Which one do you prioritize? Or because, for example, you have songs. No, can you really kind of separate them both? Or do they come in a package? Do you have to look through it? How is that relationship important?
The answer is yes.
Great.
Okay. To explain this, you have to understand that you have to take a song holistically.
Okay.
You kind of have to exegete it. You know what I'm saying?
What's exegesis? Just
exegesis is understanding and pulling out the purpose that the author intended when they did such creative work, whether it's a song, whether it's a letter, a poem, whether it's the Apostle Paul.
Okay, sure. There you go.
But you have to exegete it. You have to know the context, right? Why the artist wrote this to whom he was writing, to whom did he intend to write this song. But the beat doesn't necessarily matter. And I know that can be a point of impasse for some people, right? The style of the song is like great message, but why does it have to be surrounded by percussion or a rap style or whatever?
Or rock or, whatever.
Because we automatically see these things as what? Secular, right? As not having to do with holy. And because we do that, there's this like schism between all of creativity. So we compartmentalize creativity that ultimately does come from God, right? Okay. He gave us the ability to create, and we push it aside. So there's a this song and there's a that song. But what I've seen that quickly evolves to there's an us and then there's a them. Okay. I'm very reluctant for this separation because, again, labeling it just makes it easier to label people themselves, right, as a distant or as a togetherness kind of thing. But I'll just go back to your question again with one analogy, the cross. I know this is going to sound a little bit far off, but this is actually what I come back to every time when somebody asks me this question is, what was the cross before Jesus was ever on it? What was that tool used for? Mm-hmm. It was used for torture, right? It was used for death, like the most horrendous of ways to die by the hands of the Roman Empire. But because Jesus was on it, because of what he did, that cross today is now what? The biggest symbol of hope that we have. It's the biggest symbol of, oh my gosh, there's something better on the other side. And so my argument, given that example of the cross, is that it's not necessarily that the tool itself can be bad, but how it's used. Okay. You can use a hammer to build something beautiful just as much as you can use it to tear something down.
You're tapping into a little bit of the area of like kind of repurposing.
Yes.
Like repurposing this. But I mean, maybe I want to probe a little bit. Can we repurpose everything? I mean, because there are certain things that you cannot repurpose as a whole.
And I agree 100%. And that's why I agree with the approach of treating every piece of art or song separately, individually, within its context.
So you're saying that not just taking a surface value, but going a little bit deeper.
Going deeper, being intentional. Okay. Because I've had plenty of times where I bought a song because I liked it sonically, right? For its, how it was composed, how it was written, chord progression, beats, whatever. But as I was listening to the songs or listening to it over and over again, I realized, oh my gosh, this message doesn't really resonate with what I believe. Mm-hmm. It's low key, like just actually not helping my case, right? Because believe it or not, music does just amplify your emotions, right? And so I've had to delete songs upon further
exploration.
Intentionality is key.
Yeah, I think that what you're saying is true. Like, when you take it as a holistic purpose, it's like, well, like a beat or a song or a thing, it's not necessarily inherently wrong or inherently evil. It's just like, but there are certain things that are so embedded. Yeah. Like, there are like the lyrics of this song and the beat of this song is so embedded that you cannot separate your mind from it.
Yeah, no, it's like trying to listen to, Let You Down by NF. And it's like, oh, how about Candy Shop, 50 Cent? Right. You know what I'm saying?
When you have
There's some things you don't need to ask that question for. There's some things that at face value, they give you enough evidence to say, okay, this is something I don't want to be listening to.
So there is a case, or there's a way that we can repurpose certain things
to a certain extent.
But there are other things that is kind of not impossible, but it's like, at least within our context, it's not possible to repurpose.
And again, I stress the necessity to explore the song and treat it individually.
Now, when it comes to music, there's also another area which is maybe a little bit correlated, but not necessarily equal, and that's like worship, right? So like, you can worship God through Christian music, right? And that's important, right? But like you're saying, it's not necessarily that it comes in a certain package. Like, Christian music is not just this soft beat that has a certain Jesus lyric to it. Yeah. That does it.
There's another analogy I use when I talk to people about this. Look at the Garden of Eden. Okay. You imagine all the different colors, all the different sights, all the different fruits that are there for Adam and Eve to be able to eat from and enjoy, right? And it was intended that all humanity would be there, right? And you just see different vegetables of different sizes, different flavors. everything in God's creation reflects diversity. Mm-hmm. Okay. And every person is different too, diverse, whether it's skin color or down to their chemical balances. In the same way, I don't think God ever intended us to have one uniform way of worship. I think the only uniform thing about worship, which by the way is not just worship music, it's all of your life,
right,
is the constant, which is Christ. You see what I'm saying? That's the one thing that is uniform. It's Jesus. He asks for unity, not uniformity in the Bible, especially in the New Testament. And I think we have a hard time mistaking unity for uniformity. Because uniformity means, okay, everything is the same, everything looks the same, sounds the same, this is it. Unity means that although those might all look the same, they're united under one constant factor, right? And so with Christian music, I don't believe that gospel or CCM, Christian contemporary music, or Christian rap or Christian rock, one or the other is bad or better than the other. It's a fact that because God is diverse in his creativity, we are diverse as humans, and so we have diverse ways of worshiping him.
Yeah, I think that what you're saying is very true. It makes me think of, like, the different ways that we worship God, and like maybe you go to church or spend sometime in nature, or like there's different avenues that you can get to that. Some people may be listening and maybe have this question. It's like, but is there a right way? I mean, like, isn't there like a way that God accepts or that he prescribes? Is there something in the scriptures that can guide us? I don't know. Is there like one method, or is there like, okay, this method may be applied to all other areas? How would you interact with that kind of thought?
Through what I've seen, first we have to understand what was the purpose of worship. Mm-hmm. Now, asking the question, does God need to know that he's lifted high by all of us? Or is that something that he already knows?
Okay.
So is worship really a reminder for him or a reminder for us? Was it a tool embedded in us, created by God, so that we can become more aware of him? Because there's a power to when you hear yourself say something, when you hear yourself sing something, especially words that you couldn't find before that resonate to your heart. When you say that aloud and you hear something physiologically, it's proven that it just enhances, it amplifies in your mind. So I believe worship was a tool given to us by God so that we can be equipped with his promises. Because let's say you put a worship group up there leading, right? And are any of them sinless? No. Is anybody in the crowd sinless? No. But what are they singing about? The one who is, right? The one who promises that he is going to be faithful and that he loves them. And so when you lead that out, what you're really giving to people is you're equipping them with the sword to cut off all the excess, all the lies, anything that hinders you from having a healthy perspective of God. So you have to remember, what is the purpose of worship? Is it because God is egotistic and he needs to hear it all the time? No, it's because we need it to remind ourselves of who he is. And how that's brought about, which style, is there a right way? Now, I could definitely say there are a few wrong ways. I wouldn't agree with like sensual dancing as part of like worship. Right. I've definitely seen jumping. I've definitely seen people, dancing and jumping for joy. And that was a sight to see, because you could see what they're celebrating in their heart is the victory of Jesus, and how much they realize that it affects their life. So, but part of that is also understanding a little bit of the anthropology of us. Why? Okay. Because someone has to have put creativity, the need for celebration, the need for, that rhythm when our body hears a beat, rhythm starting to kick in. Somebody must have put that in us. Right. And Satan doesn't have the ability to create. It was God that put that in us. We have a side of us that is logical and made for calculating and dealing with all of the factors that we need to make a decision. And we have a side of us that is expressive and emotional and artistic. That was put there by God. So just because something looks, sounds, or feels expressive in a way that is unusual to your, more logical and rational side doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong. We need to take a holistic view of how God made us. And I think that and understanding the purpose of worship is the key to understanding whether, okay, this is right. Okay, this one's definitely wrong, or this way of worshiping.
Yeah, it's kind of like within us, like, it also relies in the community, right? Like you shouldn't be pushing for something that your community doesn't want per se, like, like pushing for like a specific music style because you like it, but hey, if the other people don't like it, don't try to force them. Like, maybe try to have a dialogue or like express hey, we want to express diversity or things like that. I think that's very important.
And just to add on to that, and I've been on both sides of what you can call the extreme, right? I remember one time at church, at the Brazilian church I was, seeing somebody raise their hand in the hymn, right? Like as they were worshiping, I was thinking to myself, what are you doing? What are you doing? Put that hand down. Like, but immediately God's voice was like, why are you trying to get in the way of how this person is genuinely worshiping me?
Right.
And it wasn't, he didn't say that in words, but that feeling, I know he put that feeling in my heart. It's like, why am I thinking so harshly about this? I'm just as broken as however broken I think anybody else in this room is. And I've also jumped to the other extreme. All emotion and none of the reasoning and no logic. When I was 17, I went to my first Hillsong concert, and you know how it is. It's pretty hyped up. It's pretty legit. Everybody's jumping up and down. There's some calm songs. There's some pretty,
hype beat.
Hype beat. Like, but the words didn't come through. I was there only sonically. You know what I'm saying? And so I've experienced both imbalances. And what I can say today is that if you understand the anthropology of our mind, how God created us, and the tool that he gave us called worship, you can begin to understand where to find balance in all this topic of Christian music versus secular. Should I listen to this or not?
Well, those are very good thoughts, and I really appreciate what you're saying. It really makes me think that, hey, music is just more than the beat or more than the sounds that the instruments make. It comes from inside. It comes from whoever is making it, and there's this embedded, contextual and united. United sense as to I've composed songs in the past, and it's like they come out of experience. Some of them do talk about Jesus. Others are just like, hey, I'm going through this right now, and I'm just kind of like, I'm not the greatest composer, but it kind of speaks to me because I'm composing it, right? And it comes out of a place of what I'm going through. And I think that when we're listening to music, we also have to remember that the people that composed that music had a purpose in mind. Had an experience in mind, and maybe that experience wasn't the best, or
But just a little quick side note I forgot to say: I don't think secular music should be our bread and butter.
Okay.
Now, like I told you, music amplifies your emotions. You can listen to a secular song, right? But if that's all you're listening to, if that's your bread and butter, you're only going to amplify kind of. Although it helped you vent negative emotions in the first time, those negative emotions can now just be amplified. Right. So there's that to watch out too. So if I were to tell somebody, okay, if you're going to listen to the song, here are the 2 steps you need to do. I would say be intentional about finding out the context, exegeting the song, right? Pulling out the meaning of the song. But the second is be prayerful and honest with yourself in your evaluation.
Right. Am I listening to this because it's helping me or maybe understand something about myself, or is it just because of pleasure? I'm
telling you, I was at that first concert and it was not worth it. Why? Because I knew that I was there only for the music. It was a great experience. There was, this emotional high. I was at tears at some points. But at the end of the day, I came back a little empty still. And so just being honest with yourself is always worth it. It's always worth it, because in your journey, we can't afford in this journey with Christ to be fake with ourselves or with him, because first of all, he can see everything. Right. And second of all, it'll help us grow further.
Yeah. I think I really like what you're saying, because it kind of reminds you that, hey, there's something more and something to kind of introspection, look inside to see why you're listening to this. And if this is helping you, I mean, good. But if you're just doing it for pleasure, like, then it's probably maybe becoming an idol, becoming something that's replacing that connection with God. I think when you said like, hey, listen to this, but it's not your bread and butter, it kind of reminds me of, I believe was Charles Spurgeon, great preacher, that said like, visit many books, but live in the Bible. It's kind of like that idea that, hey, there are books out there that say a lot of good things, literature, that kind of, and music, that can help you explain or help you understand the world in a different way. But your core, your center is going back to Christ.
One analogy I use is like, it's okay to have an open mind. And if having an open mind is traveling at sea, right? And your soul, your salvation is the boat. It's okay to leave the harbor and go travel as long as you have a compass, right? Which is the Bible. As long as you have that guide, your captain, which is Jesus, it is not bad to have an open mind. But when you go out in open water without a map, without a compass, you crash in the shallows, you come across this and this problem.
Right.
So open-mindedness is not inherently the issue at all. It's, are you going with your compass or are you going without it?
Yeah. That's a good way to put it, because it also reflects part of like, hey, at the end of the day, the compass is going to help you discern.
Yeah.
Because our hearts are deceitful, and like, we can worship whatever we want, but the compass kind of redirects us towards, hey, this is actually good or is helping you. It's like, I remember talking with somebody about like, this similar topic on the topic of music. And this person was saying like, oh, well, I don't understand. Like, how can you listen to this song or listen to that song? It's like, well, let's say, for example, the book of Song of Songs, right? Canticles. And here we have a expression of love, like, and God.
Beautiful book.
Beautiful, excellent book. But, we don't really talk about it that much.
Right.
And there's not a lot of music, Christian music, that talks about the relationship between a husband and a wife. Right. And, when you listen to secular music, right, it's very romantic. It's trying to attract. But some music really talks about the relationship between like sex and over-sexualizing. And, women and men. But there's other music, like, for example, I can think of one album by Nora Jones, right? She talks about marriage, like, her experience with her husband. And I think that's maybe like a lens that can help you understand Song of Songs.
Another example would be a new song in Francesca Battistelli, The Way You Smile. It's cute. It's romantic. It doesn't say Jesus. It doesn't say anything. But it brings that Christian perspective of relationship. Right.
Yeah, it's different than listening to other songs that may be demeaning.
Very explicit.
Yeah, exactly. And those...
like DNA by Kendrick Lamar.
Sure. And those songs kind of like, or maybe like last summer, I think, or 2 summers ago, Despacito, like, you had that where it's like, oh, this talks about sex. And a lot of people were trying to say like, at least to me, well,
and it's not an issue that like sensuality is bad, right?
Right.
It's, within its context, it is healthy, it's appreciated, and it's beautiful. However, when it's over sensualized, right, or when it's presented without its context, especially through the avenue of music, which so directly affects our body, that's an issue then.
Yes, and as I keep thinking about that, it's just like, I think it's important to know the meaning. Like, for example, if you try to get Battistelli's song, you're like, oh, well, you're talking about their husband. Like, that was the first intention. If you listen to these other songs, it's like you're trying to demean people. You're trying to portray like hooking up is good,
or it's derogatory.
And that's where the compass helps you identify.
And again, like you said, the compass, like you reach that part of ambiguity. It's like, how do I feel about this? You go to the compass. But then when the compass shows you the way, you have to be honest with yourself. There were parts where I wasn't honest with myself. I suffered a great deal. I amplified emotions in my mind in my early teen years that I didn't need to amplify, right? So that's the thing. It's like the second part is, okay, once the evaluation is done, be honest about where you stand and where you're going to go.
And commit to maybe the way that you don't feel like pulling.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, that makes sense. Well, thanks a bunch for, sharing a couple of thoughts about music, worship, like, the interaction with culture and things like that. As it's our tradition in the show, we give our guests the last word. So go ahead, tell us a little bit more. What's the final message that we need to take home about music, culture, worship, and all of these topics?
All art comes from God. That means all of it has the potential to be used for amazing things. However, when we reach those opportunities to use art, whether it's music or any form of creativity, let's always be intentional about the art that we're receiving and the art that we're making and putting out. And always being honest with ourselves and letting Jesus kind of guide the way. That way we can find ways to self-express in a healthy way and at the same time maintain a balance where Jesus is at the center all the time. So approach music with an open mind, but be intentional about what you're listening to and ask yourself the hard questions. It's worth it. But if it's something that you know it's healthy for you to listen to and it's not necessarily Christian, by all means though, listen to it and enjoy it. It was made for that. So just everything treated with context and being honest and intentional, and you should be fine.
That was our interview with our social media coordinator, Felipe Mendes. We hope that this discussion has sparked an interest in you to explore and reflect on your relationship with music and culture. As a final announcement, I would like to say that we are now on Spotify. So if that's your platform, your preferred platform to listen to podcasts, or you know of someone that's the preferred platform, please share our content and support us by going to Spotify and subscribing. Thank you for listening today. We appreciate that you have taken the time to listen to our podcast and ask that you share it with others. Please leave a review on iTunes or your favorite podcatching app. If you're enjoying our content, we want to invite you to consider contributing to our cause by becoming a Patreon, where you will receive exclusive content, have the ability to sit down with the Disruptive Adventism team, and ask relevant questions for Adventism and society. If you're interested in contributing, head to patreon.com/Disruptive Adventism. Another avenue for contribution is to purchase our merchandise through Amazon or tpublic.com. You can find the links for merchandise on our Facebook or Instagram pages. We also hope that our content has intrigued you a little bit and that you decide to stay around for future podcasts. If you have any comment, feedback, or a topic you would like us to discuss, please go to our website at www.disruptiveadventism.org or shoot us an email to disruptiveadventism@gmail.com. We're eager to engage in discussions about any matter, so don't hesitate to contact us. This has been it for today. We hope you join us next time, and as always, we invite you to be disruptive.